Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. We are studying this page number 196. There are 4 means to gain knowledge. The means to gain knowledge. Say, you need to understand this means what? Here the means the source. The source of gaining knowledge are essentially 4. Also when he says means to gain knowledge, means knowledge is to be gained. To be gained means what we understand from that is knowledge is not obvious. You need to work to get it. It's not natural. Like swallowing is natural. You don't need to be putting any effort to learn that. You just have to put that thing in the mouth. It will swallow automatically. You don't have to teach. Breathing is obvious. As soon as a child is born, the animal is born, it starts breathing straight away. You see, there is no necessity for any specific effort. But when it comes to knowledge, you have to gain that knowledge, which means you need to work, you got to slog, you got to put in a particular effort. That which assists you to gain that knowledge in your effort is what is referred as means. And those means are of 4 fundamental types, he says. There are 4 essential means, which is known as Pramana. Right? This Pramana, when you study, you need to remember this. Now, this means what we need to recognize is when you are attempting to gain knowledge using a particular means, one Pramana, that should be exclusive to that Pramana only. That knowledge can be gained only by that Pramana. You cannot have same knowledge gained by 2 Pramanas. You see, for example, to gain knowledge of the color, you have to employ one means, that is your eyes. You cannot gain that knowledge through any other form, any other equipment, any other means. So the Pramana of color is only through one source. So the source has to be only one. You can't have one knowledge gained from 2 sources. That is not possible. It is exclusive. Only then it is to be treated as Pramana. Otherwise, it's not a Pramana. Remember, to call something as Pramana, there are conditions applied. Everything doesn't become a valid means. Reliable source. You see, for us to establish whether it is a reliable source, first point you need to remember is this, that it is that particular can give only this particular. So, if I want to gain that knowledge of that particular, subject, I need to use only the particular pramana. I cannot say I will use any pramana to gain that knowledge. That is not possible. I cannot engage my logical thinking and detect what is the color of it. Logically, you cannot. There's no logic there. Like they give the example of, the beetle nut, the beetle leaf. The beetle leaf is green. The beetle nut is black. And then the calcium, the chunna they apply is of white. You mix these three, what is the color you will get? Now you can't go to this RGB. What is this RGB combination, sir, for this, and this? If I add these things, will I get this color? No. But when you chew the three together, what you get is a different color. Red color comes. Logically, can you detect that? You can't apply your inferential expertise. You can't use deductive logic, or you can't use inductive logic, all those things for you to understand what is the color of an object. If you want to gain the knowledge of a color, you have to employ only one pramana, that is eye. If you want to know the taste of something, you have to employ only your tongue. There is no other option. You can't understand the smell, with the smell you can't decide the taste. That is not possible. There was in a movie that is possible. There was a fellow, a blind man will become the number one chef in the world. A fellow who has no sense of taste, he becomes a chef. He wins the international chef competition. Ella movie la possible, but in life it is not possible that you can have a person, because to know the taste, you have to have your tongue. If your tongue is not employed, you can't look at something and say what is the taste of it, how tasteful it will be. You can't decide it. You have to. That's why there's the taste of a pudding is in eating, not in looking. So first point you need to remember is this. And the second one, what you need to remember is you cannot validate the knowledge given by one pramana employing another pramana. Using another pramana, you cannot. Whatever the conclusions, whatever the knowledge that is stated, given by one means, one source, cannot be validated nor invalidated. You cannot establish that. You cannot give supportive arguments from those things are all not possible here. 2. 3. Third point, what you need to remember is which pramana I have to use will depend upon what knowledge I have to gain. Right? What is the subject of inquiry will decide the pramana, which pramana to be employed. Now here, the subject of inquiry is the fourth state. What is this? Self, pure consciousness, Brahman, is the subject of inquiry. Like color is the subject of inquiry in the example we saw. The taste is the subject of inquiry in the example we saw. Now here, what is the subject of inquiry? The fourth state. the state of Brahman, Atman, God, self, consciousness, spirit, life principle, quickening principle, etc. Right? Now, all this is the subject matter inquiry. Now, what is that pramana should be accepted as a valid to gain this knowledge? That is why we are studying the four means. I suppose you are all with me. Right? Why suddenly we are studying this four means to gain knowledge? Is we are attempting to gain the knowledge of Brahman. When you are attempting to gain the knowledge of Brahman, you need to know how you can gain that knowledge of Brahman. You can't say, I'm going to employ my senses. Not possible. Then you can't employ your inferential ability also, analytical ability. That is also not possible. Then he gives one more, upamana, comparison. Even comparison is not going to give you. Finally, he will establish only this agama, tradition, Vedanta is the source or is the only source through which you can gain the knowledge of Brahman. Nowadays, we immediately get annoyed when we say only. How can you say only Vedanta? Why are you so fanatic? Now, if you want to study mathematics, only way to become a mathematician is what? Only way to become a doctor is what? Only way to become an economist is what? I want to become an economist, but why are you so fanatic that I should study economics? Abdul. Ishwaran, why are you so fanatic that I have to study medicine to become a doctor? I will study arts, theatre. I'll study theatre, performing arts. I study, and why can't I come out as a doctor? It will be like that. You know, so here, that's what he is going to establish. He gives this four. Of the four, the final one is the means to gain knowledge. So when we say means to gain knowledge, you need to add that word only within brackets. The only way to know, to gain the knowledge of the color is through eyes. So that only need not be mentioned every time. Therefore, we remove that. Unnecessary words we remove. But what, as a student, when we study, what we have to understand is what? The only way is through Shabda Pramana or Agama or Vedanta in our language. That's what this four, there are four means to gain knowledge. Yes. So before you go there, these points you need to remember in the background. What is Pramana? Means what? You know, that which is the source of knowledge is called Pramana. Prama, Karanam, Pramanam. That's all. All that you need to remember is these three words. Prama means knowledge. Karanam means instrument. That which is the instrument of knowledge. That which is the means to gain knowledge. That which causes knowledge is called Pramana. That's what is referred as means here. There are four means to gain knowledge. It says that means is this. Karanam is the means. There are four ways to gain knowledge. Four sources of gaining knowledge. Then there is a great study they do. I'm not getting into all the details in that. No, that will become too much to go in. What do you mean knowledge? How do you define knowledge? What is a knowledge is valid only if it is gained through a particular pramana. Otherwise, it's not knowledge. Remember, through a pramana, you have to gain knowledge. Only then it is treated as knowledge. Otherwise, it's not knowledge. That's why in the wrong knowledges, they have a list. These are all considered as, invalid knowledges. Invalid knowledges listing you see very interesting. You see there that the Arka Shastra, Nyaya Shastra, they study what is a valid knowledge, what is invalid knowledge. Valid knowledge means proper knowledge. To be considering something as knowledge, you should be able to establish the pramana for that. What is a pramana for this, they ask. Then you have to establish what is a pramana for that. For example, your fantasy is not knowledge. Your imagination, that's not knowledge. Why? There is no pramana for that. Your memory is not considered as knowledge here in the study of logic. And they go through this steps, how that is established and all that. That much detail is not required for us. All that we require here to understand is this much. That why this pramanas that we are studying here. Because if I have to gain the knowledge of the fourth state, what is option available for me? There are 4 options available. Of the 4, valid one will be the 4th one. The first 3 are not valid. In this, the first one is totally ineffective. The second one, slightly better than the first one. For what, sir? Remember this. Every time I will not be saying this. For gaining the knowledge of the self. Okay. This Anumana is more effective than Pratyaksha. For what? That's important. See, you can't say always Anumana is superior to Pratyaksha. That is why the basic points are very important. For what? To know the color, you cannot employ your inferential skills. It's not. That's why Pramana is very important. Is this the Pramana for that? You have to establish. If you cannot establish, then it is not treated as valid knowledge. Then comes the third Pramana with reference to gaining the knowledge of the self, which is the third one. The third one is Upamana, comparison. Comparison is slightly better than Anumana. Obviously, much better in with reference to this direct perception. So Upamanam is better than Anumana and Pratyaksha. But that is also not effective. There is a fourth one, which is Agama, tradition. That is the real source of knowledge, complete source of knowledge, with reference to which knowledge? Knowledge of fill in the blanks. To have the knowledge of the taste, you can't go by tradition. You can't check the Upanishads. You can't say, has Shankara written anything about pizza? You can't. Right? You can't ask him, which coffee is better? You can't ask, Upanishadic master to know about that. Now you have to go employ some other means only. You see? So depending upon what is the subject matter of inquiry will define everything. So then comes the details he is going into. That's what he will establish. Now, of that, the first one, Pratyaksha, is the least valid. It is means only, but it doesn't give you that completeness because there are a lot of defects in it. There are a lot of problems there with reference to the senses. So can you rely on senses to gain knowledge? Not possible. All that you can know cannot be revealed by senses. If you have to go purely by senses, then it is the sun that is moving, because that is what your senses reporting. If you take literally final authority is what's there in life, it is only my senses, then we need to take, I'm just giving one example, then you can go on adding examples for that to give a proof. You know, how you cannot rely on senses. Then you can't say, first of all, we can't even say earth is round. If you rely on your senses, earth is what? Is it round? It's not round. It is flat. That is what our eyes are reporting to us. So if you take now, what is the real shape of earth? If you want to go and gain that knowledge, can you rely on your senses? Is the earth moving around the sun or the sun moving around the earth? Can you rely on your eyes, senses? So that is where other subjects, other pramanas got evolved. How and other pramanas come into picture is because to offset or complete the doshas or the defects in the fundamental one. But Pratyaksha gives its own. That's what he is going to explain now first. This Pratyaksha, one way of gaining knowledge is by perception through your sense organs. Your eyes see color and form of an object, and you know the nature of that object. Your ears hear sound, nose smells, tongue tastes, and skin feels the touch. The organs of perception are used to gain the knowledge of the world. But these senses cannot know the self, Atman within. You cannot gain the knowledge of self by direct perception. It's not possible. So if someone says, I saw Krishna, I saw Rama, I saw this, I saw that, all those things, straight away we take it as what? It is not the Pramana, full stop. Because that knowledge, what he is talking about, cannot be the subject. It is not within the purview of the senses. Is it within the purview of the senses is the point first. Is algebra equations within the purview of the senses? You can see that shape. I remember Purni coming and telling me, and she was very small, about just going for that Montessori school. She came one day running to me. She said, Akka doesn't know mathematics. And that girl was studying, MSc, chemistry. She's studying. This one is, in this Montessori. And she comes and says, she doesn't know mathematics. I said, why? Because she is adding A, B, C, and R, she says. She is writing all her equations, She saw her book. as far as this girl is concerned, 1, 2, 3 can be added. Multiplication possible with 1, 2, 3. How can you do multiplication with ABCD? Yeah. I said correct. But how can you put it up in your eyes, your nose? How do you understand algebra through your nose? It will not. The direct perception gives some knowledge. What are the things it will give you? It will give you the color and form. Your direct perception can be used to establish sound, establish smell, establish taste, establish touch, sensation. That is possible by the senses. Beyond that, senses are incapable of. And the subject matter of inquiry he is establishing in the first itself. He says the subject matter is what? The senses cannot know the self. So which means the subject of inquiry for us here is what? Not the smell, not the taste, not the touch and all those things. Here it is Atman, God. So anyone who claims that I have seen God is a what? It is not Pratyaksha Pramana. If it is not Pratyaksha Pramana, then we have to find out which Pramana on which he is talking about. Can it be referred to Anumana? Can you be referring to Upama? Can you be referring to Shabda Pramana? If it is not coming under the category of any one of these Pramanas, then it is not a valid knowledge. Full stop. It is rejected as knowledge. You cannot verify that. Non-verifiable assertions. These are simple assertions people make statements, but it cannot be valid knowledge. So here, first one, sense perceptions are ineffective when it comes to this. Ineffective means it is rejected straight away. So it is impossible for them. Then Anumana. Another method of gaining knowledge is through inference. This Anumana. Now he's not getting into the detailed study of Anumana and all that. Now Anumana, you wanted to know, he gives straight away example he goes to. Says, just as you see smoke and infer there is fire, though you may not actually see the fire, you could employ this method to get to know the self. You learn from knowledge and experience that an extroverted, intelligent, now he is getting into the subject. What he is saying is, first he is establishing what is Anumana. Right. The huge one, he just compresses in 2 lines in fact. He says, knowledge gained. Another method of gaining is inference. Just as you see smoke and infer there is fire. Where distant mountain, you see a cloud of smoke. And then you understand what? You immediately claim, hey, I think there is fire there. You just see a cloud of smoke at a distance and you claim there is fire. On what basis you are claiming there is fire? That is called inference. On what basis? That's where the study of this Anumana Pramana is studied first. That's what I was referring to. You know, there is a method of gaining knowledge here. First, you need to establish what is Anumana. Everything cannot become Anumana, remember. You see, like, you know, a black cat crosses, business fail, immediately you can't say this, I inferred. You see, that's not considered as Anumana Prabhan. People take it as that's not Anumana. Then what is Anumana? Anumana means there are rules for that also. An inference should have certain conditions applied. What is it? What is that you are trying to establish? You are trying to establish the presence of fire where? In the mountain. On what basis? The basis of seeing cloud, of smoke. Right? A thick smoke, you see. On the basis of seeing smoke, you are establishing the existence of fire where? In the mountain. On what basis? How are you doing that? It is because it is already you have gained that knowledge. Right? This is where it becomes a interesting one. You see, how far you can use Anumana, from where Anumana becomes ineffective. The efficacy of that you have to know first. Employing this means. Now, Anumana, it has got, essentially it has 5 parts. Okay. Anumana Pramana has 5, parts to it. The first one is, what is the Paksha? The first one. That needs to be mountain, the locostat. What you are trying to establish. That is, what is there is the mountain. Then fire and smoke. First you understand the example. Then it will become a little easy for you. Mountain, fire, smoke, and then you have the knowledge of the relationship between smoke and fire. You have that. There has to be a relationship between the two. Is there a relationship between mountain and smoke? There's no relationship between that. Right? You are not trying to establish the existence of mountain. Okay? That is also not your attempt. That's why it's very important. That is called Vyapti. That relationship. The relationship between the two things. Between who and who? Between smoke and fire. What is the relationship between smoke and fire? Yatra yatra smoke, tatra tatra fire. Wherever smoke, there is fire. Can you say the reverse? Wherever fire, there is smoke. That you cannot. That need not be. But smoke cannot exist without fire. That needs to be established. With what you are going to establish that first. That prayer thing. All this study, all that he is compressing here. He says, just as you see smoke and infer there is fire. This is the Anumana Pramana. So first one, what we have seen is Pratyaksha Pramana. The second one is Anumana Prabhan. Yes. You could employ this method to get to know the self. You learn from knowledge. Now he's deriving, okay. So what I mentioned earlier is the final conclusion. Finally, he will say, this is also not effective, this is also not effective, this is also not effective, only that is effective. But as of now, that is not known to us, okay. So we are just, Like I'm just telling exactly like how we solve our accounts problem. When it is not tallying, we'll go back to the answer. From answer, we come back to this. After we concluding, we come back and study. That's what I'm telling in the class. But when you're reading the book, he is deriving. So first he established Pratyaksha not effective. Then Anumana, he says, you could employ, maybe you can try. Since Pratyaksha failed, try Anumana, he says. You could employ this one, says. How? That's the next idea now. You learn from knowledge and experience that an extroverted, indulgent life leads one to mental agitation and sorrow. Conversely, introverted pursuit of truth brings inner peace and joy. The more introvert, objective you are, more peaceful, joyful you become. The pleasures of the physical body may be enjoyable, but they have a limitation. They become insignificant before emotional feelings. The emotion of joy that the mind derives is subtler, superior to physical indulgence. One could give up a physical pleasure for an emotional joy. Far superior and subtler than emotional feeling is intellectual satisfaction. To gain the ecstasy of intellectual wisdom, one would readily sacrifice one's emotional joy or physical pleasure. Thus, your happiness increases as you dwell deeper into your personality. Stretch this principle further to the innermost core of your personality, the self within. You infer the bliss of the self to be supreme. So now he is moving subtler now, Anumana, using the example of introversion and extroversion. So first what you need to do, you need to have an observation first. For any inference, you collect the data for thinking. First, you have to see smoke. And establish it is a smoke, isn't it? If it is a fog, and then say there is fireman, that's wrong then, you see. So first you establish the presence of smoke. Similarly, how you do that, sir? Through observation. Through observation, you register that first. Or it could be pollution also. Like in Delhi, when I went first, from the airport, when I came out, I said, no fog here. After 1:30, the driver looked at me and said, that's not fog, that's pollution. I said, oh. I thought it's fog there, 1:30 in the afternoon. You have so much of fog here. First, establish that it is smoke, not cloud, not fog, not same way. Observation, that is established through observation. Right? What is observation here? The observation here is whenever a person is extroverted, his mind is agitated. He lives a disturbed life. Right? Now, don't ask me to explain all that now. Now, I'm not going to explain. Sir, how is that? How introverted, extroverted, all that you have to study, go backwards. Okay. Now, we don't do all that. All these things are already studied. He already explained it. Okay. Now, you don't go back to those points. Now, you take that as observation. You say, yes, whenever a person is extroverted, indulgent, he goes through mental agitation, sorrow, suffering, misery, disturbance, depression, stress, etc. Now, converse also we see. The reverse also happens. That is important. to establish observations are correct means this is what I was referring to, a relationship. First, we have to establish the relationship between the two. What is it, sir? This is there. All extroverted pursuits, agitation, disturbance. Then comes the converse. Opposite of extroverted is introverted pursuit. All introverted pursuits leads to peace and bliss. Correct. Now, the pursuit of the self is where? Is it extroverted pursuit or is it an introverted pursuit? It is introverted pursuit, sir. Introversion means what? You go to the subtler dimensions of your personality. What are the personality layers? They have the body. Subtler than body is the mind. Subtler than mind is the intellect. Subtler than the intellect is the self. Extroverted means you are moving towards the world outside. You are moving towards the world of objects. Then you are extroverted person. When you are moving introverted means you are moving in this direction. When you move in this direction, that is established from your own experience and your own observation, which is irrefutable. Right? It has to be irrefutable, relationship between the two things. What is it? That only then it is getting established. Only then it is correct. Otherwise, the hetu is wrong. You see, that this needs to be established between the two things, the smoke and the fire, the hetu and sadhyam. Now here the sadhyam is the self. Right? Hetu is this, the presence of the subtler you go, quality of joy keeps increasing. Okay. Now, what is the logic now? When I go outside, if I have to derive pleasures, I employ my senses. Through senses, I get pleasure in life. Correct. You can't deny that. When you eat a chocolate, there is pleasure. You can't say there is no pleasure. Even if it is a bitter chocolate, you eat that and say, yeah, very good taste. I say it's bitter, but still it is tasty for that person. Right? For another person, there are people who cherish Karela. Bitter gourd. Very tasty. This bitter you taste, people call it as sattvic. You have bitter beer, tamasic. Both are bitter. What is the problem? This is not an excuse I'm giving to connect both and say, fantastic, sir. From tomorrow, don't start all that, okay? It's bitter, but they say it is very tasty. You see, there is a establishment first. There is a pleasure when you are eating, when you are contacting through the senses, you get X amount of pleasure. How you derive, we're not discussing right now. Okay. Now, to gain that knowledge, you need to have this, you need to have that. All that is all there. I'm not referring to all those aspects. All that is understood right now. Next thing, what we observe is wherever you are able to derive emotional pleasure, that emotional pleasure, you experience it so hugely, so intensely, you forego the physical pleasures. You ignore the physical pleasure. Once you start enjoying the emotional pleasure, like we give the case, mother gives the sweet to the child, to her child, not to any child, okay, to her child, and she gives. The child is eating that sweet and enjoying. seeing that mother gets more enjoyment. Who is getting more joy there? Not the child. The mother is deriving more joy there. What is the proof? The proof is, for the superior, you will forego the inferior. Whatever I consider as superior, I will forego the inferior. Correct. That's a law of life. All these are all established ones, remember. Right. Then comes intellectual joy. Intellectual pleasure, he says. Far superior and subtler than emotional feeling is intellectual satisfaction. Now you need to know what is this intellectual satisfaction. Intellectual satisfaction means living your life to your conviction. That's called intellectual satisfaction. I stand up for my convictions in life. That is intellectual joy. When you start deriving intellectual joy, which means when you start experiencing intellectual joy, automatically that person foregoes emotional, physical pleasures. Automatic, that is. What does it establish? It establishes physical pleasure X, emotional pleasure X plus, intellectual pleasure X plus plus. This is showing what is a trend now. The trend is, as I am going subtler, as I am tuning myself to the subtler dimensions of life, the joy content or the pleasure possibility is increasing in geometric progression. It goes on increasing so high. And beyond the intellect is the self. Therefore, the self, when you attune to, that pleasure should be what? Far, far superior to even intellectual pleasure. Thus, we establish what? We establish you gain X amount of knowledge of the self, Brahman, Atman, something. Pratyaksha cannot give any knowledge of the self. Anumana Pramana gives you indirect knowledge of the existence of the self. Possibility of greater pleasure, infinite pleasure possibility is established. This is one line of reasoning. If you take this, Brahma Sutra, the whole text is through establishing through Anumana Prabhan only. Full analytical, that is. Derivation. They establish that with proof. After proof, after proof, they go on giving that intellectual joy is superior than emotional. Emotional joy is superior than physical. Which means, as we go subtler, this is happening. Same way, we can have our own observations in various forms. Okay. Now we understand what? Selfish is person and unselfish person. Selfish cause, unselfish cause. Beyond that is a selfless cause. If there is a thing possible means. Right. That is far superior to these two things. But then this Anumana Pramana also has a defect. It has various defects. Okay, now we are not going into the what all the defects of Anumana Pramana, we are not getting into. Okay, like what all the defects of Pratyaksha, we are not getting into. then we have to study Nyaya Shastra for that. We are not studying that. But this also has certain limitations. The limitation is what? The fundamental limitation of Anumana Pramana is it is based on observation. The fundamental data that you are receiving is through observation. Now, we know observations are all influenced, is all dependent on the observer's state of mind. Right? Unless if the observer becomes colored, then his observation also gets colored automatically. Isn't it? That's why we see that in school with kids. The moment you start liking the teacher, you start liking the subject. Isn't it? First, you need to like the teacher. The teacher is very good. Right? Since I like the teacher, I appreciate the teacher, something about the teacher. It could be anything. It could be simple things like, the teacher shared one day lunchbox with me is enough. For a fellow to get impressed with the teacher and start liking the teacher. And once he starts liking the teacher, automatically he starts liking the subject also. Isn't it? Like that. You like that, you like this also. So you get colored. You see, the observations can be colored or can be faulty. If the observations are faulty, if they are colored, biased, then employing inferential reasoning will result in what? With Anumana, that's what this text says beautifully. With Anumana Prabhan, you can convince the convinced. With Anumana Prabhan, you can never convince the unconvinced. Not possible. You say, then it doesn't make any sense. I say, then for what Anumana Prabhan is? You see, if I'm already convinced, then using all this is going to be doing what actually? It's not going to help you at all. See? So there is a defect there. This Pramana itself carries a defect in it. Inherent defects are there. Possibilities for defects are there. Not as much as Pratyaksha, but this also carries this. Then comes the quality of reasoning. That intellect's ability to reason. That also can influence the Anuman, the thinking capacity of the intellect. So how much you have harnessed your reasoning skills. Now we have not, developed that reasoning skills for us to employ. So it has certain defects. But it is far better than Pratyaksha in the sense of what? You can infer the existence of something beyond this and guess how it could be, what it could be. An intelligent guess. It's not a, wild guess. Intelligent guess is possible. Right. This is Anumana Prabhan. Okay. Now he's going to the third one. Upama. The third means of gaining knowledge is comparison. An unknown object is made known by comparing it to something known to you. The supreme self within is not known to you. The fourth state of self-realization is unknown. One has no idea of that state until one reaches it. However, by drawing a comparison of the fourth and waking states with the waking and dream states, one could possibly envision the nature of that transcendental experience. One of the biggest sentences in the book. That's not the style of the author at all. Never gives the sentences, running to paragraphs. Like that was the old style of philosophical writings. If you see, one sentences, one paragraph. Now, typically, if you want to know, you have to read Aurobindo. One page will be one sentence. All punctuation marks you wanted to learn, read Aurobindo. You will become an expert in, not in Vedanta, not in philosophy. In punctuation, you will become an expert. All punctuation possibilities will come in that one sentence. So you need to follow this very carefully. However, by drawing a comparison of the fourth and waking states with the waking and dream states, one could possibly envision the nature of that transcendental experience. The Shastra scripture declares that the entire pluralistic phenomena of the world you experience merges into the one reality upon self-realization. All the consciousness of perception, emotion, and thought retire to the one pure consciousness. This goes beyond human comprehension. How can this solid, substantial world disappear into nothingness? It's not possible. Now, this is called Pramana. The means of comparison helps clear this mystery. I'll just read that and then explain. Okay. The transformation of the waker into the self-realized person is akin to the transformation of a dreamer into the waker. That one sentence he gave, that he is explaining in the paragraph here. That sentence is getting explained here. The waker views the objects and beings and all his experiences in the waking world as distinct, innumerable. So does the dreamer view the dream objects and beings and all his experiences in the dream world as distinct, innumerable. The dreamer's experience of the pluralistic phenomena of the dream continues as long as the dream lasts. The moment the dreamer wakes up, becomes the waker, the entire dream world folds back into the one waker's mind. The waker instantly realizes that the one mind had diversified into the pluralistic phenomena of the dream. One ray of the mind became the dreamer, another ray the dreamer's wife, a third the dreamer's child. Thus, rays and rays of the mind had projected the dream sun, moon, stars, and flora and fauna and the rest of the dream world. The dreamer's intellect can never conceive, much less accept that the countless things, beings, and experiences are all but the one mind of the waker. Only the waker realizes that. Similarly, as long as the waking state lasts, the waker experiences countless things and beings, emotions, and thoughts. The waker's intellect can never conceive, accept the pluralistic phenomena of the waking world are all nothing but one supreme reality, Brahman. Only when the waker realizes his supreme self, moves up from the waking to the fourth state of self-realization, the waker and his world merges into that one reality. Thereafter, the reality, Brahman, alone exists. The enlightened then realizes that the entire pluralistic world of the waking state is but the one reality alone. Now, this comparison is the essential one here. What is this method of comparison? Comparison is superior to Anumana. Upamana is better than Anumana. Understood is better than Pratyaksha. Right. Now, comparison is what? First, you need to understand what is this method of gaining knowledge. Method of gaining knowledge is this. Is that you need to know. Like, for example, bison. You've never seen a bison in your life. Right. Or for example, or even bison is a very traditional one because everybody knows those things. What to give example is a difficult. You got to imagine only. Right. Imagine a person who has never seen a bison in his life. To him, you have to explain what is bison. How will you explain? It has 4 legs. Huge one. He'll think it's like a big dog because he has seen only dog in his house. Now he'll take it like that. Now he has never seen. Now how can he infer? Logically also you can't detect. Because for logical detection, what is needed, sir? All the conditions should apply there. Now this fellow doesn't have that also. Right. So he needs to have the previous knowledge of what wherever there is smoke, there is fire, he should have seen already. Only then he will say, when he sees smoke, he will say there is fire. Isn't it? That's Anumana. Now, this one has never seen something like that. Like I remember Swamiji giving this example and just explaining this Anumana. Right. How will you explain Modaka to an Australian? We had one student from Australia that time. Explain that Modaka to him. Yeah. Now, with what will I explain him Modakas? You see, coconut mixed with jaggery and then roasted nicely. And then what you do, sir, then take some rice flour, make it into one chopu, small, case, and then put this, a little that you have to put, and then steam it. What you get is Modaka. Okay, now what is the taste of it? If he asks, now how will I explain the Modaka taste to him? Only way is what I have to bring that Modaka, give it to him. He said, now eat it. Now, when you see Modaka, that's the problem with Modakas, Other sweets, you can guess there is a possibility that it could be sweet. When you bring a cake and look at the cake itself, there's a good chance of knowing. It looks, possible. Now you look at Modaka, it's impossible for it to guess it is a sweet actually. It's fully covered. Not in most of the houses, it all gets, broken. The broken ones are useless. They don't even know how to prepare it. A good preparation means no clue of what is inside actually. The whole thing would look white outside and no taste. You take it and lick it also, you will not get the taste. Then how you have to eat it? Take the full Modaka, put it in your mouth. You can't bite it. You bite a Modaka means you don't know how to eat it. Take the whole thing and put inside. And then the first bite when you give, something releases. That is realization. That's the bliss of realization. That's what Ganesha has, Modaka in his hands. Take the whole thing and put it in your mouth. And close your eyes and bite. No clue, no guarantee what is inside. This comparison. With what will I give you that inference possible? Not possible. Then I ask him, do you know Chinese one? He says, yes. Momos, yes, momos I know. Same way, this also. Only difference is what? Momos you put vegetables, here you put a fruit, coconut. That's all. Then he gets an idea of what that Modaka will look like. It will be like the possibility. Right. Now, otherwise, the first two are not effective. here, what is that we are trying to establish? Is we are trying to establish the knowledge of Brahman. What is that state of Brahman? What is the state of God? What is the state of fourth, state of realization? How can you understand it? They say, simple. How the dream to the waker is exactly like that. For the waker, the fourth state is.